Chapter 4. Confrontation. James grabbed his helmet with both hands, dropping to his knees in despair. At a time like this, Lionel could only sigh. However, under the silence of the arena, a resounding boom of two clashing bodies sounded. Lionel grimaced, feeling his already fractured ribs break cleanly as his vision was filled with sights of the moon above. It was then a loud whistle blew through the silence. Unnecessary roughness, roughing the passer, number 21. Half the distance to the goal, still first down. Lionel landed heavily on the ground, grasping at his chest with his eyes squinting in pain. The rookie stood over him in shock. At first, he had let his frustration get the best of him. He'd never for a moment thought that James would drop such an easy layup of a pass, so he unleashed everything he had on Lionel, knowing they would lose the game. Never did he think that his actions would give the Royal Blues another chance with 0 seconds on the clock. The medics rushed onto the field. Despite the Royal Blues gaining new life, the stadium still remained silent. The sight of Lionel writhing in pain made many send furious gazes toward the rookie and James. "Bennett, get the hell off the field. Rook, you're in!" Coach Owen coldly benched his 5-star prospect. He didn't know what was wrong with James today, but he was clearly in his own head too much. It was impossible to use him for this final play. The medics quickly lifted Lionel's jersey, undoing the bandage wraps from the first half to reveal ghastly purple and green bruises. It was simply impossible for a bruise to spread so quickly. The only explanation was that Lionel had suffered this injury very early on in the game. "Don't." Lionel grabbed the hand of the middle-aged male medic who tried to take his pads off. "There's just one play left, I got it." Coach Owen, who had rushed onto the field, frowned deeply, his arms crossed over his well-built chest and his mustache billowing. The team stood around Lionel's slowly rising figure, solemn expressions on their faces. They knew that everyone made mistakes, but at the moment they were having a really hard time forgiving James. "What are you all pouting for? An injury timeout doesn't last forever, let's do this. Line up!" Seeing Lionel's resolute attitude, the medics and Coach Owen had no choice but to jog off the field under the silence of the crowd. In those moments, the heavy breathing of the players who stood on their last legs was all that remained hanging in the air. Lionel's fiery gaze lit a fire under them all, filling them with a strength they didn't know they had. On the sidelines, Conrad looked on with a gloomy expression. Victory had been in his grasp, yet it slipped away, just like that. Lionel slapped his hands together, standing behind his offensive line as though he wasn't injured at all. Lou 80, down set hot. Lionel sat in the locker room breathing heavily. The sounds of celebration surrounded him, causing a light smile to play his handsome features. Who knew how they did it, but the guys managed to get their hands on a few dozen champagne bottles. Their wristwatches were probably beeping away with talks of the underage drinking code. Unfortunately, he couldn't take part too actively. Though he could forcibly ignore his pain if need be, as he did on the final game-winning play, it was probably best he didn't move too actively, lest his ribs puncture his lungs. "Stop moaning and groaning, Cap. You're not getting out of partying tonight." One of Lionel's O-linemen, 3-star center Milan Inga, slapped his shoulder without regard for his grimace. He swung back a flask of vodka, his massive, fat-covered body somehow appearing ripped of muscle at the same time. "Oof. I already promised I'd come. No need to kill me first." The guys laughed, hopping in the showers one after another. Lionel gingerly took off his sweaty pads and undergarments, taking his time. He planned on hopping into the showers last. Although he was pretty certain that Aina wouldn't come, he still had to put his best foot forward just in case. Luckily, he had already prepared a decent outfit. It wasn't as flashy as what those rich boys could bring out, but he was still happy with it. "I'll probably have to have one of the medics rebandage this for me," Lionel thought to himself. Hearing a sudden plop by his side, Lionel turned from his locker to see his coach half dozing off, a strong scent of alcohol leaking from his mouth. Lionel laughed. "Coach, you're gonna get yourself fired going around like this." Fuck those preppy pricks." Coach Owen tipped his flask up as though mockingly toasting the very people he insulted. Lionel almost didn't understand his slurring words. "Look at you. How embarrassing. You get like this every year. What's it to you? You're gone after this time anyway, off to the bright lights of the NAFL. This old man will just stay in his little town." Lionel couldn't hold back his laugh. "You're the coach of the best academy football program on Union Continent. Your salary is enough to retire now and live a life of luxury until you finish putting that other foot in the grave. Usually, Coach Owen's mustache would blow and he'd have another witty comeback waiting for Lionel. But this time, his response was completely unexpected. Thanks for choosing Royal Blue, kid. Lionel was stunned silent for a moment. He very well could have chosen Angel Wing, allowing him to attend the second-ranked academy. But he chose Royal Blue because he liked Coach Owen's straightforward personality. As for the first-ranked academy, they didn't have a football program, seeing the entertainment path as something beneath them. In the end, Lionel smiled lightly. Don't thank me. Thank that dead rat on your lip. If not for how fun it is to poke fun at it, I would have never come here. Coach Owen laughed uproariously, slapping Lionel's back even harder than Milan had. Finish drinking that green vomit your old man gave you, kid. Ignoring Lionel's grimace of pain, Coach Owen walked away. Enjoy it while you can. Lionel was too busy trying to calm his pain with ice to hear Coach Owen's last words. But they were never intended for him to hear to begin with. After his pain pangs slowly faded, Lionel dug through his locker to find his black bag, pulling a familiar bottle of green sludge out. As far as Lionel knew, his father worked in a government division that focused on nutrition and enhanced nutritional supplements. The Ascension Empire believed that, while their technology advanced rapidly, the human condition lagged behind. So this unnamed division worked toward maximizing human potential with food. This gross concoction was one of his father's creations. According to his gene assessment, he was slotted in to grow to 6 feet tall. But after drinking this poison every day, he superseded that by 3 inches and might very well gain another inch or two by the time he reached his 20s. Of course, Lionel's father was actually a 4-star general. He only went on to work in this unnamed division after he retired from military service. Then he proceeded to retire once more from said division. After chugging what remained of the bottle, a familiar scorching pain seared Lionel's chest. But at the very least, his aching ribs dulled down a bit. It would probably take a normal person about 2 months to heal, but Lionel would only need about 3 weeks. Time ticked by, and Lionel was finally the only one remaining. Though he could have used the refreshability of his watch, he preferred taking a shower, as did most people. There was just something about it that felt cleaner. Taking his time, he scrubbed every inch of his body before walking out with a towel around his waist and one hanging loosely over his head. Slightly obscured with a pattern of green, purple, and brown bruises, his torso rippled beneath the heated steam. Lionel rubbed the towel through his hair, wincing as he struggled to keep his arms above his head. Reaching into his locker, he put on a pair of deep blue jeans, a skin-tight white turtleneck sweater, and draped over a long black trench coat. It's only 8 p.m. right now. Dad won't kill me too much if I'm home by midnight. Lionel slung his backpack over his shoulder. But the moment he turned, his footsteps stopped. What are you moping around for? Lionel smiled toward James. If it's a struggle for you to tell me, then just don't tell me. There's no need for you to be sorry. That rookie would have hit me like that whether you caught the ball or not. For a while, James didn't know what to say. But he didn't move out of the way of the door either. You knew you would get the unnecessary roughness call, right? Lionel's smile dimmed a bit, but he didn't respond. I know you too well. You don't like to lose, but you're too soft-hearted to call me out on my bullshit, too. So, you'd find a way to protect our friendship and ignore it, all while winning the big game anyway. Am I right? Lionel sighed. Is there really a need to know the answer? Of course there is. James's voice rose. If you knew I needed your help, why couldn't you just lose this one time? This is just a game, isn't it? You've already won 3 times. Did you really need to win for a 4th? Lionel's gaze narrowed. Whether I want to or not is irrelevant. In everything that you do. I already know. I've heard it 1,000,000 times. Respect and persistence. Respecting this garbage hand you were dealt. You're definitely the first. Congratulations! Lionel's eyes flickered with a hint of sadness. James, why are you being like this? You didn't even try to talk to me beforehand. We could have come up with a solution together. Did you think using being late to class as an excuse was enough? James' expression rapidly changed, flaring with anger, then shame, then finally, capitulation. I'm sorry, I lost my cool. There are just some things that... Never mind. It doesn't matter anymore. What's done is done. James shook his head, recollecting himself. Turning away, James reached for the door. After a pause, he turned back with a bright smile as though nothing had happened. Come on, all your adoring fans are waiting outside to crucify me. The party's going down in Blue North Dormitory. We gotta get there before all the booze is gone. Before Lionel could respond, James ripped open the door, unleashing a sound wave of flashing cameras and the shrieks of groupies. In the Nayafel, reporters were allowed into the locker rooms. But, since they were minors and the bigwigs were worried about optics, they were forced to wait outside at the academy level. At the same time, Royal Blue Academy's campus was usually locked down from outsiders. But there were rare occasions, like today, where those who paid obscene amounts of money or had appropriate connections could come. Like this, Lionel was forced to wade through a sea of reporters and fangirls with a bitter smile on his face, James's sinister laugh sounding off in the distance as he ran away. Chapter 5. The Incident. It wasn't until at least half an hour later that Lionel managed to slip away from all the onslaught of questions. Since he was pretty much locked into the first overall pick in the coming months, it was no wonder he was being hounded like this. That said, just because he understood didn't mean he liked it. Damn it, I'm late. I don't want Aina to misunderstand. Lionel pedaled madly across campus, his silver bike streaking like a comet across the skies. About 5 minutes later, he finally made it to the northern dormitories. Since there were too many outsiders on campus today, he clicked a hidden button on his bike's frame, causing it to fold in on itself and becoming a silver rod about 2 meters long. In the end, it further collapsed, splitting into 4 pieces that neatly fit into his bag. The blaring of music could be heard even from Lionel's distance away. He hadn't even entered the apartment-style building yet, but the sounds of clattering glass, laughter, and club music was impossible to miss already. Blue North Dormitory was the male boarding house of the northern dormitories. It had the greatest luxury and accommodation of them as well. Usually, women wouldn't be allowed anywhere near this place as their dorms were located in the south. But, nearing the end of senior year, there was an unspoken rule among supervisors to let some of these things slide. At the very least, Lionel could see many of these blooming beauties through the windows and even strewn around outside, sneaking away with their lovers. Seeing these sights, Lionel sighed. Would Aina really come to such a place? Maybe he was asking for too much. Thinking to this point, his footsteps couldn't help pause. These were some of his last chances to capture Aina's heart. If he failed now, who knew when he would see her again? Aina was a 5-star professional. Lionel didn't know of what profession due to certain protections. In order to protect students from being poached and harassed by conglomerates and distracting them from their schooling, this information was usually sealed. Lionel was a special case in that he was an entertainment professional. As such, his protections weren't as great. Considering how high Aina's protections were, she was definitely destined for a very important industry. The only reason Lionel even knew she was 5-star at all was due to simple coincidence and a slip of the tongue. Lionel clenched his fists. How well did he know Aina? What were her hobbies? Her favorite foods? Favorite color? Lionel didn't know the answers to any of these questions. However, he was enamored. There were other women just as beautiful as Aina, some of whom had even tried to deliver themselves into his arms. But there was something about this woman in his heart that overshadowed them all. If my profession isn't enough to be by her side, then I'll toss it aside. Lionel's aura blazed almost like a beacon under the night skies. Just as Lionel was about to take another step forward, the sound of a crashing window shook him out of his thoughts. The screams of the female students shot across the night sky. However, the blaring music hadn't come to a stop. Lionel's gaze shot upward to a body half hanging out through a 4th-floor window. A young man's lower back scraped along the now jagged windowsill, his body barely being suspended by the hand grasping his collar. However, it was clear that his hand wasn't trying to save him, but was rather likely the reason he was in such a position to begin with. James? Lionel didn't wait even a moment. Breaking into a sprint, he tore into the dormitory. Those who likely didn't know what was happening upstairs due to the loud blaring music tried to greet him, only for him to blow right past, shooting up the stairs. Lionel reached the 4th floor in a flash. He had completely ignored the screaming pain that ran across his chest and torso. A fall from the 4th floor was no joke. Conrad! Lionel burst into the 4th floor's lounge room, his voice carrying a biting cold that overshadowed even the music that shook the walls. The room was quite luxuriously decorated. Soft carpets, a 4-star chef who stood behind a curved bar nonchalantly as though nothing was happening, and several table games from pool to foosball. However, Lionel's gaze landed on the very young man he had faced on the field just an hour ago. 4-star quarterback Conrad Siegfried. "What do you think you're doing?" Lionel's voice simmered, but it was somehow still possible to hear him clearly. He scanned the room quickly, trying to get a read of the situation. He immediately noticed that there were several members of the Angel Wings here. This in and of itself wasn't a problem, but he had never heard of a losing team joining the winning side's after party like this. What could they be here to do if not cause trouble? It was then Lionel froze. Aina? Aina? He was stunned. He had really been fully prepared for her not to come, yet she really was here. Not only that, but it seemed like her and her 2 friends were somehow involved in this scuffle. Seeing Lionel's genuine happiness the moment his eyes met Aina's, many inadvertently smiled despite the situation. Aina herself blushed and looked away, trying not to meet Lionel's gaze. "Oh, so, she's yours? It's no wonder why this guard dog reacted so furiously to my casual words." Hearing Conrad's words, Lionel's expression once more became cold. He was smart enough to understand what must have happened. James was likely here accompanying Aina and her friends, knowing that Lionel would be a bit late due to his actions. At some point, Conrad came and tried to make a move on Aina, causing James to lash out. It seemed that James was a bit too drunk, or else with his size and strength, there was no way Conrad could put him into such a situation. "Let him go. Are you trying to commit a murder with so many people here?" It was unknown who exactly, but the surround sound system of the 4th floor was turned down to the point only the music from the other floors reverberated through the walls. The members of the Royal Blues gathered around Lionel without him saying a word. With their leader here, there was nothing that needed to be said. No matter what, the Angel Wings were outnumbered here. Lionel didn't know what was going on the other floors, but there were 12 members of his team here, and only 7 of them. "So what if I do? Do you think I would be punished for it?" He asked his question teasingly, as though he really wanted Lionel's genuine opinion. Conrad's response caught Lionel completely off guard. He considered himself to be an intelligent person, but he was completely blindsided. After considering for a moment, he finally understood. Hadn't he committed a felony just this morning? And that was just with his father's retired status. What of the Siegfried family that was powerful enough to make the mere 4-star Conrad rank higher than Lionel on the eligible minor list? It wasn't that Lionel had never thought of this. It was rather that he never realized that someone could use this loophole to get away with murder. Weren't there limits? Lionel's crimes were completely innocent and put no one but his own self in danger. But Conrad actually wanted to cause the death of another person for nothing more than an exchange of words. Lionel fell silent under Conrad's sneer. He didn't notice that from the side. Aina observed him with a slightly curious gaze. "All right, drop him then." Conrad's eyes narrowed. "Do you think I won't?" "No, I'm certain you would. However, you'll have to face the consequences." "Consequences?" Conrad's tension dissipated, a laughter shaking his body. James' body tipped further out the window, nearly disrupting the balance that kept him alive. "And here I thought the mighty Lionel Morales was intelligent. It seems that you're just a fool." Lionel expressionlessly watched on as Conrad laughed. Several seconds ticked by before an uncomfortable feeling started to well in the latter's heart. Soon, even the remaining 6 Angel Wing players felt too stifled to laugh. "Yes, consequences," Lionel replied plainly. "If you drop my partner from that window, you 7 will follow him right after." Conrad choked on his own breath. Lionel's biting, cold gaze pierced through his heart. "Do you really think you can say such a thing? Do you know who I am? For just this threat alone, the consequences you speak of are far beyond your wildest imaginations." As though on cue, a voice once more sounded in Lionel's ear. "Infraction code 22.314 Murderous intent detected. Under the Speech Moderation Act of 2034, all manners of hate speech and threats are classified as a Type 9 misdemeanor R. It is advised that subject Lionel Morales rethink his coming actions. Any murders committed by subject in the next hour will not be considered in self-defense, and can only be tried as second and first-degree murder. I don't particularly care. Drop him, Lionel replied without taking a pause. Everyone could see the flashing lights of his wrist through the black coat that slightly covered it. The warning red lights only appeared as a warning to bystanders who may get caught up in the coming actions. He really meant it. Conrad finally froze. I may go to prison for the rest of my life. I may be placed on death row even as a minor. But you 7 will be dead, so what chance are you going to get to gloat? Those who weren't involved in this sudden clash suddenly felt that their whole worlds were taken over by the sight of Lionel's silhouette. Lionel was maybe the person with the lowest standing of their Royal Blue Academy. There were others who entered only by their own merits, but none shined as brightly as he did. Yet in such an elitist society he had made friends with them all. There hadn't been an occurrence of Lionel being bullied for his background in a very long time. He was a peer they respected, one who made them forget about how powerful their mothers, fathers, and families were, simply to enjoy his company. Seeing him stick out his neck in this way for a friend regardless of the consequences, it made their eyes redden. Incredibly moved, several more individuals stepped forward. There were no words spoken, but Conrad went from facing just 12 to feeling the emotional tidal wave brought forth by almost 30. At this moment, Conrad was caught between a rock and a hard place. If he took a step back, he would look weak. But if he continued along this path, he might really lose his life. It was then that it happened. Centuries from now, historians would come to know this event as the dimensional descent. It was the day that Earth evolved and their plane of existence morphed. It was the day they ceased to be the top of the food chain. A loud blaring noise cut through their silence and the wall-shaking music of the other floors. The expressions of everyone present changed, their wristwatches vibrating with several continuous warnings. Warning, warning, we have entered a code red, Class 9 state. Warning, warning, we have entered a code red, Class 9 state. Everyone present knew exactly what this meant. Code black. It was the lowest and most normal state. Class 1 was a normal day, while Class 9 was used in situations like the spread of a minor virus. At most, the worst death totals would be in the few thousands to tens of thousands. Code blue. It was a medium state alertness. It was usually used during rebellion by one of the Paradise Islands or the satellite moon societies. The worst death totals would number in the hundreds of thousands, potentially millions. Code red. This was a cataclysmic event. It was a situation where the Ascension Empire's efforts had to be focused on solving the problem as opposed to protecting its citizens. As a result, there would be very few individuals in position to help them. The death totals would be within the billions. And Class 9 was the highest of them all. A sudden blinding light streaked across the skies. For a moment, it seemed it was day rather than night. Everything trembled. The ground, the air, even their bodies, as though an inexplicable pressure was bearing down on them. Gravity seemed to increase by at least 10%. The air grew heavier, a lack of oxygen making those around feel stifled. At the same time, their gazes grew foggy as a dizziness overwhelmed them. It felt as though they had entered an elevator that decelerated far too quickly. Then, everything shut down. The music, the lights, their wristwatches. The world fell to darkness. At that moment, hundreds of Paradise Islands across the planet plummeted from the skies.